Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Meta Cafe. Grab your cup of coffee or tea, sit back, and let's talk about what's going on astrologically today. But this is a day we're also going to go deeper into the gene key 44, where the shadow of interference is at work in our lives. And let me tell you, this morning, that's what I've been doing a deep dive into. And extraordinary ahas coming up out of that this morning for me personally, but not only that, for all of you as well as the collective on the planet here. So I can't wait to share that with you this morning. So before we do that, I want you all to be thinking about something this morning. And good morning, everybody out there. And maybe I'll wait for a couple of minutes. I see Debbie. I see Suzanne. I feel like I'm on Romper Room. Hello, Michelle. I've got my magic mirror and I can see all of you out there. Welcome to the morning show. And we have a lot to get to. So first, I want to give you something to contemplate while I talk about some other things going on here today. I want you, and Debbie, I talked to you yesterday, so I know you have stuff. And Suzanne, I know you have stuff. And Mimi, I know you have stuff. And Michelle, I know you have stuff that you can relate to here in what I want you to contemplate. I want you to take a look right now at your lives. Be thinking about this while we're talking this morning. What is it that seems to be the biggest sticking point in your life right now, where there's a theme perhaps that's repeating, where there's a dysfunction that maybe you can't quite put your finger on, but you know it's there, right? You may not know all the words to use for the dysfunction that is happening between you and maybe another person, but it is relationship oriented. And relationship doesn't always mean necessarily that it's with another person. It can be your relationship to your work, your relationship to your money, your family, etc. Right? It could be with people, or it could be with, something that's really annoying to you, or something that seems very dysfunctional in your life. I want you to be thinking about that. See if you can even jot down a couple of things that come up to you while we're talking. Because I want to show you how this shadow of interference in the gene key 44 is playing out. But before, excuse me, before we get there, let's talk about what's happening today. Well, luckily, it's a fairly quiet day. Fairly quiet means that, in the background of all the things that are going on, there is not much to add to that soup of stuff today. Yay, right? Yay. We already knew this was going to be an impactful week. We already knew this was going to be that there would be things that happen that were turning our world upside down, or, just issues, right? This was going to be that week. So in a day like today, then we're not adding too much more to that, mostly because the moon is void of course for a good chunk of the day. And that starts at 10:10 a.m. Pacific time. So 1:10 p.m. for you all on the East Coast, and lasts until 4:51 p.m. West Coast time, i.e. 7:51 p.m. East Coast time. So a good chunk of the day is given to a void of course moon. Tam says, another impactful week. Right, Tam, we talked about this on Monday morning about this particular week, because in human design, the sun is sitting at gate 6. That is the gate of impact. And it is literally, in some instances, the gate of war and love. And like any of the gates in human design, there seems to be this, this spectrum of ways that we can experience the energy, with each end of that spectrum being the more extreme, right? War is the extreme at one end, love the extreme at the other in the gate 6, but it's all about the impact. And literally the search for intimacy, because that's what the whole gate is really about. It leads to the gate of sex, and it connects the sacral to the emotional. And it's where we see a lot of the juicy emotional connections that we as human beings make. So anytime the sun, or any planet for that matter, is sitting at gate 6, we have impact. Then we have the earth sitting at 36, which is the gate of turbulence. It is a gate of transformation, to be sure, But often that gate creates this restless, bored feeling within us, and we're doing things, like there's this chaos swirling around us. And sometimes we just have these things that erupt in our world that cause us to feel alive, even if it's not so much the positive things, i.e., flat tire, Debbie, flat tire, filling up your purse with water, things that have impact that seemingly have no purpose, but really do, right? In some respect. But now it's not up to me to tell you what those impactful moments mean, but for you to contemplate, which is why I asked you all to think of something that's really dysfunctional or seems to be really chaotic in your life right now, because those are the juicy things that we're going to talk about when we get to the shadow of interference in the gate 44, gene key 44. But altogether, today is one of the quieter days. It doesn't mean that impact isn't happening behind the scenes or that it isn't, building in your life in some way, but there's just nothing to add to it today. No new ingredients to go into the impact chaotic stew. The only thing in real action today is the sun conjunct Mercury. That's why this is such a great day, actually, in the whole of the week, because the sun and Mercury can deliver messages directly to your consciousness and or allow the information from the unconscious to bubble up and to be able to be presented to you. Now, when I look at where this is happening in my own chart, it is happening in the third house of communication, of teaching, of packaging up information, even if it's like marketing stuff or promotion stuff for myself, or whether it is packaging up things for people for readings or ultimately for information that will be forthcoming in the near future. So it's a great time, at least for me personally, to be working on communication, wherever that is in your chart, the sun and Mercury together, giving you great mind power and ego energy to complete a project or to work deeply into a project. So to me, that's great. And it's also trining the moon today. And that is a really great flow, if you will, of energy going around from the emotions to the mind to the sun and its physical expression of the ego self. So really smooth, cool aspect there. There is a more tricky aspect coming later in the day. But by the way, this happens almost about the time that you're going to bed tonight, where Mars and the moon conjunct. So you may have some chaotic dreams. There may be some things that come up in your sleep for you to work on. But thankfully, it's happening later so that we're not having to deal with it face to face with people, right? Conflict or confrontation, emotional uprisings, things like that. May be happening. Other parts of the world may be facing that during the day, but we in the United States, at least, will be facing this in our sleep this evening, or at least late enough in the day. I'm thinking for us on the West Coast, more like 6-7 o'clock p.m., which puts it about 10 o'clock for you all. And the time that it lasts might be into, mid early or early in the morning, like 1, 2, 3 in the morning. I like it when that kind of plan comes together. I'd rather work it out in my sleep, and then I like the things that I can work out in my sleep as opposed to the things that happen that create conflict or confrontation during the day. So I'm happy to deal with my unconscious through my sleep patterns, through a dream or something like that. So if you're restless tonight, that would be why, right? Restless, but not necessarily something that's negative or really bad. So Debbie says, good, hope I'm asleep, had enough this week. April says, good morning, everyone. Tam, we've already read Tam's, another impactful week. So anyway, that is basically all I have for the aspects of the day. So let's take a look at what I didn't have time to share with you yesterday, which is some of the more positive configurations that are happening for the upcoming autumn equinox. So as you know, I believe it was on Monday, we talked about the more scritchy, irritating aspects of the fall equinox, and that happened to be a grand cross or a grand square where we are fixed where we're stuck in a pattern, and then there's a T-square overlaying that, and the T-square has an open end. I'm going to show you the picture that I showed you on Monday really quickly. So we have the Grand Cross, but we also have the T-square. And the T-square being highly energetic because it isn't balanced down here. There isn't a balance point here. So the point is at the tip, or the tip of this particular T-square is pointing at Saturn. Duty, responsibility, form, structure, integrity, right? There, it's pointing us in that direction. It's pointing us to our Capricorn selves. And Saturn in Capricorn, a sign it rules, is very powerful now in disrupting your forms, your structures, or let's put it this way, exposing the weaknesses in those forms and structures. Kind of like when you have a highway that, you know, gets a pothole in it, or a bridge that's got a weak spot and then ultimately collapses. In our structures, like in our government, where we have you know, structures and things that are put into place that are no longer useful, Saturn actually exposes the unsustainable nature of things, where the weaknesses are in your structures and your forms. So it may be exposing the weaknesses in your business, literally in your home, if you find your home falling apart. In your own relationships, it may expose where the relationships are not sustainable, but that is the purpose of that kind of energy, right? The square is an exposing of the weaknesses. The base of that T-square, remember, is formed by Chiron at one end and the sun at the other. And that puts a lot of focus on the wound, the pain, the irritations in our lives, the places where perhaps the things that we've built are keeping us from self-acceptance, from becoming independent, are keeping us locked to an old collective belief. So that was the irritating aspects coming up with the autumn equinox. Now, piggybacking on those more negative, I say negative, but they're really not, right? Without those kind of challenges, we don't grow, right? If everything was always, you know, kittens and fluffy hair and things like that, we would never get anywhere, right? If my cat sits on my lap, I can't do anything. I should say when, because as soon as I sit down, that cat is on my lap. And I don't want to disrupt her because I like petting her. I like the warmth, the feeling, the coziness, but I get nothing done. So I don't sit down in my living room when she's in there unless I really want to sit down and not do anything for a while, right? So there's this scritchy energy that disrupts that pattern so that you can get things done. But we also need the more gentle things going on to hold the balance, right? Otherwise, we're all fritzed out and crazed and chaotic. And so let's look at what's the nice things going on. And actually, there are more nice things going on. I just want to talk about two that are interlocking, and I'm going to show you the pattern right now. And when I show it to you, it's going to look chaotic, but in reality, it is not. Voila. So what we have here in this particular pattern are two interlocking mystic rectangles. And the mystic rectangle is a fairly stable configuration. And it's the ease and flow of energy that makes life feel magical, where we embrace the unknown, we come out on some end in awe and in the disbelief about how magically things happened. So the mystic rectangle, I didn't realize there were two of them until I drew in the first one and I went, I'll be darned, there's another one there. And they're made up by some interesting pieces, right? Typically a mystic rectangle, and I only drew one in here, a mystic rectangle is made up of obviously a rectangle, right? Where you have these four corners, and a planet anchors each of the four corners, but they're connected also by oppositions. So in this particular mystic rectangle, we see Venus over here at 7 degrees of Scorpio, the moon over here, and then Uranus down here. And then what's anchoring over here is Pallas Athena and the part of fortune, which most astrologers aren't going to pinpoint. So here I am in my uniqueness here, because this is happening as part of the fall equinox. It jumped out at me. And then the oppositions. So we have Uranus opposing Venus, and then we have Pallas Athena opposing the moon. or the part of fortune opposing the moon. So mystic rectangles are made up of oppositions, but are also connected through the trine energy of four of the planets, excuse me, and the sextile between four of the planets. So we have a preponderance of positive energy that is mitigating the effects of the opposition. So unpack that. Let's say what we have here is the awe and magic, perhaps, that we can see in our relationships, because Venus being the prominent player on this cross, opposing Uranus, is really about how it is that we can awaken to what our relationships are showing us. And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes when we get to the Gene Key 44 interference, or the shadow of interference. And we also have Pallas as part of this, right? Opposition of the moon to Pallas. Now remember Pallas Athena. She is the feminine that springs from the masculine's head. In the mythology, she springs forth from Jupiter or Zeus's head, right after an axe injury that he is given from, I think, one of his wives. Fooling around, so he gets hit in the head. Maybe it was one of his kids trying to kill him, and Pallas Athena is born. She springs forth from his head, fully formed in her full warrior regalia. She is literally the warrior feminine. And the warrior feminine within each one of you is muted, right? Almost every one of us as women have been downtrodden throughout the centuries. You're carrying, if you will, the ancestral lineage of the women in your tribe. And I'm saying that because most of you are women that are listening, but also men may be carrying this ancestral female energy as well. And what Pallas is showing us in the context of this particular time period is that we got to pull up our energy. We got to pull in and claim our divine birthright as women, right? Meeting the masculine side by side. It is literally, she embodies the balance of the masculine and the feminine energies, not male, female, but masculine and feminine. Male, female is the individual expression of those energies, but the masculine and the feminine energies rule the entire of our universe, right? That some things are masculine, some things are feminine. The moon's involvement, of course, makes it come home, right? It's the expression of the soul self here. The opposition says there may be something you have to let go of, or something that you have to strengthen within you in order to bring the awe and the magic out in this particular mystic rectangle. Guaranteed, though, something magical is moving through, right? There is maybe it's an interference pattern. We'll talk about that in a minute, but there may be something magical moving through this whole season, the whole season of autumn, that we are walking through as the gateway that, holds for us some, maybe some key secrets or some key revelations, right? Revealing to us something. And the other mystic rectangle is a little harder to pinpoint because it is made up of the destiny axis. So the north node at one end, the south node at the other end, which, by the way, they're in the closing phase of their transit through Leo and Aquarius, right? Bringing the group dynamic and the individual dynamic into more focus, right? That we've talked about this before, where you are a tapestry, you are part of a tapestry, and yet you have your individual part of that, or how did I say that? You're a quilt. And if we take out that one piece of the quilt, then the quilt doesn't have the same integrity. It doesn't have the same form. It doesn't have the same beauty. So we are always an individual as a part of a bigger quilt or tapestry in life. So what we're learning in the North Node, South Node expression is about how to balance our individuality with the individuality or the group consciousness, individual consciousness as part of the group consciousness. And we see that as part of this fall equinox as well. And it reminds me of, the good of the many outweighs the good of the one or the few. And if we take that in the context of our government, for example, or in politics, for example, what we see are a lot of individuals scrabbling for their own individual power without, or their own individual clique or group, without really thinking about the wider tapestry or the wider picture of the country as a whole, or the world as a whole, right? Because we are part of so many different things. We're part of we as individuals, we are partnered perhaps with somebody. Then we are also part of a family. We're part of a city. We're part of a community. We're part of a state in this country, part of a country, part of a planet, right? The wider world. Maybe even you could break it in, other pieces. We're part of the northern hemisphere here, or you're part of the southern hemisphere. So there's a lot of opportunities for us to see that we are part of something bigger, and that everything that happens to us as individuals or as small groups has impact on the bigger whole. Interesting stuff, right? The other part of this particular mystic rectangle happens between Chiron again and the sun. We have a repeat Chiron wound, sun shining its light on that wound. And the wound is at 0 degrees of Aries. It is backing up. It's in retrograde. Ever so slowly, it is backing up into Pisces for its last light shining on our victimness and on our willingness to throw blame and to not look at what's going on within each of us, to take responsibility. So we're poised right at the balance point between being a victim, and at the other end in Aries being self-sufficient and independent and glowing in our selfhood, because we know that the strength lies in our participation in the bigger part of the group. So interesting, magical all the way around, right? Whenever you have a mystic rectangle in your own personal chart, you tend to look at life a little bit more mystically, maybe looking at it with, what is this showing me? Like signs or omens or synchronicities, coincidences that have maybe more meaning to it. So I want you all to really watch what's going on as we walk through this gateway on Saturday the 22nd at 6:54 p.m. West Coast time. So that's actually going to be, what is that, 9:54 p.m. for you all on the East Coast. And that is the time where we're walking through the fall equinox gateway, when everything, because we're at 0 Libra at that moment in time, everything kind of hangs in equanimity, in balance, in the potential for harmony. And then momentarily then begins the shift again, and the need to keep bringing us into balance, right? In that moment, there are 12 hours of daylight, 12 hours of nightlight, and the light even on the planet is in complete balance. Now, of course, if you live closer to the Arctic or closer to the Antarctic, you don't have that same balance point. But ideally, it is the model to us of balance and harmony that then, changes and moves more toward the dark. If you're talking light, right? Light, dark. Okay. Let's see. What are people saying here? Thank God. Positive. Me too, Debbie. Good. Hope I'm asleep. Had enough this week. Oh, yes, you have. And haven't we all had enough of something? All right. So in the beginning of the show this morning, I asked you all to be contemplating something that you're struggling with, some relationship issue, some kind of thing that's happening for you in your relationships, or something that seems, and remember, the relationship doesn't have to be with just a person. It could be a relationship to your community, to your money, to your job, to anything, literally anything that is showing you signs of dysfunction. Okay. Now, I want to remind you a little bit before I go further into this. Yesterday, we talked about the fact that gene key 44, or the gate 44 in your human design, is called karmic relationships, right? And it was part of the codon ring of the Illuminati. And I told you we would discover more about what that means. We're not going to discover that today, by the way, but we're looking at the macro now, and then we're dialing it in closer and closer. We also talked about the fact that the shadow energy in this gate is interference, that the gift in this gate was teamwork, and that the highest expression was a new term to us, and that is synarchy. And then we talked about the fact that there are these things that are called fractals, where when we look at a pattern and when we look closer and closer inward, or we get further and further out, we see the same constituent parts, right? The same shapes appear. That is a fractal. And we also saw that there's such a thing as human fractals, right? And the human fractals are these repetition of patterns that we see in our relationships specifically. And we see it as karmic ties, right, with individuals. That every person we meet in our life is a part of a fractal pattern of your destiny. Right? We really had a good time with this one, right? Because now we think about all those people that we really love and enjoy. And then we think of all those people who have been sort of the thorn in our sides, the pain in our backs, right? And what was it that they were showing us? So wherever you have these repeating patterns that show up in your relationships, perhaps, then what you're seeing is your fractal. And in the cosmic geometry then of human interactions, we always draw the relationships to us that teach us what it is that we need to learn. Exactly what we need to know in order to evolve our current awareness, right? Is this triggering everybody's memories? I hope so. So meaning that the people closest to you and that have created either the most wonderful, beautiful connections, but even those people who have created the most static in your life are holding the secret key to your destiny and to your higher life purpose, right? And as you learn from each of the relationships and you master the lessons in your life, the lessons that these relationships are bringing to you, you see that the frequency of these relationships raises. You might notice that because of the caliber of people that you're drawing to you, or how the relationships that you're in have changed over time to become more positive and enlightening, more supportive. All right. So now we get to the actual expression of the shadow of interference. Any questions, anybody? Any comments that I need to go to? Let's see. No, everybody's quiet out there. Must mean you're taking in lots of good stuff this morning, right? All right, but if you have questions, you can put them over there in the chat if you're on the Facebook page. Well, you have to be on the Facebook page or you wouldn't be here, right? So today we're going to talk about the shadow of interference. Now, you know that the gene keys and the human design are also based on the I Ching, which is an ancient Chinese divination system. And it is interesting to me that the I Ching had 64 hexagrams. There are 64 gates on your human design chart, and there are also 64 gene keys. As well, you have 64 codons on each of your DNA strands. So there's this lovely coherence that happens between these ancient systems, the more modern system, and your very ancient DNA. So the I Ching's name coming to meet for this particular gate or this particular gene key. It tells us that this particular gene key is about how, why, and when people meet each other, as well as the results of that relationship or that group dynamic or that family dynamic. So if you think it's an accident that people in your life are there, this is where you're wrong. Right? They're there. They're there to show you something, for you to learn something. Humans, then, I want you to think of yourself as cells of a larger organism. So if we think of the collective, right, all of humanity, right, and then we think of you as an individual, as a cell, part of that organism. So, you have cells, skin cells, but they're part of a larger organism that is you as a human being. Well, you as a human being are also considered a cell, if you will, of a larger organism known as humanity. Is everybody following me there? And in that, there appears to be a master program operating through us, causing us to evolve and change and mutate. All you have to do to understand how this is working is look at your parents, look at the grandparents, and how different you are as an individual, how different we are in terms of technology or our modern way of thinking compared to your parents or your grandparents, right? That literally is maybe just 20 to 50 years difference, right? And how much change there's been in that. So there appears to be this master program. So, and I'm using that word deliberately, master program, because I think we all understand a bit about computers, right? You've got your computer and it's, or your laptop or your phone, and it's working on a program, right? The shadow of interference is like a virus that is operating within that program, right? It's throwing the collective choreography, if you will, and those are Richard Rudd's words, the collective choreography out of sync, right? So we're here, we have this need to evolve toward healthy human. I'm sorry, I jumped time loops for a minute. I'm back. So dysfunctional families are a symptom, if you will, of this virus that's entered into, or this interference that has come into the collective. Businesses that create imbalances with their employees, with their communities, with the planet, also a part of this. Governments with inappropriate leadership and leadership teams that create chaos, that create interference. Just look at our Congress. Just look at our outer world, right? Global chaos created by this virus, this interference pattern that jumps into our experience here. But the master program isn't wrong. There is nothing wrong with the master program, right? I want you to think of chaos in your life as a diagnostic tool, right? When your body's out of sync, you go and you get a CAT scan or an MRI and it diagnoses the problem. The chaos in your life is a diagnostic tool. It seeks out the dysfunction and it exposes it to you in order to reboot the system. I'm using computer words deliberately because I think we all sort of understand, right? When my computer screws up and does weird stuff, what do? I reboot it, right? I close down the programs and I hit restart, right? I send it into a restart. But finding that dysfunction isn't a top-down process. It can't start with the collective and then move down. It starts with you as an individual. It starts with you as the individual, because then it can move up through the system. It's like going in and finding out, okay, there's a tumor, right? There's a tumor. And now I can act on the tumor rather than acting on the bigger thing first and then coming in and go, oh yeah, there was a tumor there. I hope you guys are getting this. Let me know if you guys understand everything that's I'm saying here, right? Because this applies to you personally as well, because where there is chaos in your life, there is an interference pattern working. And that interference ensures that we find the right relationships or the issues to heal the dysfunction. Not that you're the dysfunction, the relationship, it has a dysfunction. And it doesn't mean that you're in the wrong relationship or you shouldn't be in relationship. It means there's something dysfunctional going on that needs to be exposed. And quite often in the gene key 44, it is ancestral. There is this genetic baggage that comes with the gene key 44, with that particular spot on your DNA, and that these interference patterns are transferred genetically from one person to the next, right? There's ancestral healing that needs to take place here, and it's transferred through your DNA. It's almost even transgenetic, if you will, because what happens is this person marries this person, and from them springs children, perhaps. This is how a family is formed, right? Mother, father, transgenetic karma coming together. They're working that out through their children, or the children are working theirs out through the parents. And by the way, there's no rules that say that the mother-father dynamic has to be male and female, right? There's nothing in the gene keys that shows that, there's dysfunction in whether you're heterosexual or homosexual or bisexual or anything like that, right? That's not about it, right? Two men coming together or two women coming together to raise children, same thing. Ancestral DNA, transgenetic karma being worked out. So your relationships to everything from, personal, your children, your money, your, all those things, right? That relationship is designed to clear the fractal, on the individual level before it can move on up to the next level. So until couples and partners or individuals are willing to clear their dysfunction, the dysfunction in the relationship, then there won't be major change. But the master program ensures that there will be major change, right? So right now we see an outer world that is so chaotic, as individuals are being called to clear their own issues. It's so wonderful because all along I felt like that a lot of the chaos that we see in the outer world is really something more for us to deal with on the inner plane, right? That it was a call for us to clean. Now I would call it clean our fractal, but to clean our own field, our own beliefs, right? So here we're seeing it right now. Venus getting ready to sit at this gate for a period of time. Let's see if I can tell you how long, because remember, we're also going to get hit when she goes retrograde. So Venus will be at this particular gate from the 22nd, the first day of fall. How extraordinary. All the way to October 18th. We get to play with this one for a while. And then I want to say it's going to come back at us probably in December. And oh yes, December 14th through 20th, just in time for the holidays, right? So the work that you're doing now essentially then is important work. So when chaos pops out in your field, look at the theme that's being thrown at you, right? Because this is you taking one for the team. Because every dysfunction, everything that you clear for yourself, you are clearing not only for yourself, but for your whole ancestral line. It's pretty extraordinary when you think about it, because metaphysicians have been telling us this for a while, right? That this is happening. Here it is in gene key style, right? When we look at it as the shadow, and we're looking at it as the part of ourselves that we've got to look at. So everything chaotic in your life, I asked you at the beginning today to think about what's chaotic in your life right now, or what relationships are causing you trouble. And then to step back from that and look at the truth of what it is showing you. What is the truth in that dysfunction? What is the mirror? What is in the mirror? Right? Did I share this yesterday? I don't remember if I shared this with you yesterday, but there was a time, yeah, I think I did, where I grew up with an alcoholic mother and adopted certain behaviors, dysfunctions, in order to deal with that in my life. And then lo and behold, about 21 years maybe later, I see it in my relationship with my youngest son. And in that was this real, first of all, I lived with him drinking and me with the same behaviors, trying to keep everything calm and cool and collect, kind of walking on eggshells is how I always called it, right? Walking on eggshells. So I didn't, get him angry because he was an angry drunk. So was my mother, my foster mother. And then I suddenly realized, oh my gosh, what are you doing? You are his mother. The relationship isn't the same as it was when you were the one pussyfooting around with your mother, right? So I had to do something about that. I had to clear that dysfunction, but it wasn't my son that had the dysfunction. It was me. It was me. I had the dysfunction. And as soon as I cleared all of that, right, I had to go back and I had to clear the feelings that I had, the behaviors that I expressed during that period of time, that these beliefs that I adopted, that if I just kept the emotional energy down, everything would be okay. If I, just all kinds of different behaviors that I caught myself in. But as soon as I cleared them within myself, guess what? He stopped drinking. He didn't need to show it to me anymore, right? He moved on with his life in a very healthy way because I cleared myself. I didn't blame him. At first I did. I don't want you to think I'm so highly evolved that I didn't go through nights of crying and, oh my God, what is this? Why am I experiencing this? Actually, that's probably one of the best questions you can ask. Why is this showing up in my life right now? Why? Why is because there's some dysfunction that needs to be cleared. You're cleaning the fractal, right? And, who knows whether our work on this clears it all so that we in our lifetime see a world reflecting that cleaned fractal or not. It doesn't matter. Everything that you personally clean in your relationships has an impact on the rest of the world, the collective, because you are an individual cell of that bigger organism. Extraordinary, right? Extraordinary. So you're clearing it for everyone in your ancestral line when you take on the job of clearing yourself from your dysfunction or from whatever it is that is acting in chaos in your life. Right? So taking a look at all of your relationships now and being able to see the truth. I want you to look at your good relationships too. What is that telling you about you? Right? What is that telling you about you? Because that is equally as important, because that's where your win is, right? You won that dysfunction battle, if you will, where maybe, you had a really bad relationship with your mother or your father, and you're able to go back, even if they've passed on, and you can clear that fractal. You can clear that dysfunction. Doesn't matter if they're still alive, if they're in your face or not, because you're not clearing them, you're clearing yourself. And what did that dysfunction represent for you? Or what did that chaos represent for you? It's really extraordinary. All right, let's see what's going on out here. Cindy says, wow, makes so much sense. Suzanne, thank you for letting me know everybody's sort of understanding this. Here we go. I moved one of my past lives on Sunday to be updated into this lifetime so that she was not as freaked out. That past life, she had to do something she didn't want to do, and it affected me in this lifetime. I feel much lighter now. Thank you, Natasha. That's pretty awesome. Because, implied in all of this is that you're not just clearing this lifetime. You're clearing, your past lineages, your past connections, right? So April says, thank you for sharing the story with your son. I'm recognizing where I need to adjust me in relation to my son's behavior. I'm resolved with him moving from my home and love him from a distance. I need step-by-step fractal clearing. I love it. We all need step-by-step fractal clearing. The first step has to be, what is this showing me about me? Right? Where am I accepting behavior? Where am I placating? Where am I allowing this dysfunction to continue? Where am I not being honest? Where am I not being in integrity? Right? Because ultimately what you can see here is that where we go tomorrow is to teamwork, the gift in this gene key. Ultimately, you are partnered with someone in this. There's teamwork at the basis here. So one person may be karmically showing you, they may not even realize what it is, what role they're playing. My son certainly didn't. He didn't recognize what he was playing. He just knew that this was the experience that he was having. And I, sitting from my mother position, looking at the experience that I'm having in, watching his behavior, it had nothing to do with him, but it had everything to do with me. And, to his credit, at one point, he and I had this kind of a conversation where I actually honestly told him, look, this is your mother seeing herself behaving like the, child that was experiencing this with her mother. And I'm taking back my power, right? This isn't going to happen in my house. This isn't going to be the experience I'm going to have. If you're going to continue this, then you and I are going to part ways here for the time being until you can get yourself together. It was probably the most honest conversation I'd ever had in my life with anybody. And it was hard for me because I like to make everything peaceful and happy, right? Happy, happy, joy, joy. I don't want to look at the dysfunction, but I've got to look at the dysfunction because it has juice, right? It is an interference pattern that is interrupting my relationship. So I must look at it. April says a 12-step program. What is that? My only human mind answer is to tell him to live with the father because they act the same. I needed this in this moment. Thank you. So April and Suzanne, because I know you're also having issues with your son, this isn't about what's going on with them. What is this showing you about you? Because ultimately the interference pattern is within you. You're clearing it for everyone because it's showing up in your face and you're hearing my words tell you this is an interference pattern. What is it showing you about you? Where is this happening for you? Anything that you want to say about your sons is something that's happening within you, right? So April, when you say, and I'm not picking on anybody, please don't think that this is just by, happenstance that they even bring this up. When your answer is to tell them to live with the father because they act the same way, does that heal that dysfunction or does it just get it out of your face? Because I'll tell you what, if you don't deal with it within yourself, it's going to show up again and again and again, right? I knew that this whole thing with me and my son was about boundaries and being walked on, right? Being the doormat. I knew it was about that. Deep down, I knew that. I knew I was being walked on, taken advantage of, etc. And I had to call that back to myself, right? When I did that, when I worked on myself, it allowed my son the space to be able to do what he needed to do to work on himself. Now, I'm not saying you have to keep him in your life and you have to keep putting up with that behavior, but I want you to look at what it is for you, right? Because taking him and packaging him up and sending him off to his dad isn't healing what's going on with you. Even though that may be the exact thing that has to happen, you still will recreate the same situation. Remember, karmic relationships. We draw to us the fractal of the imbalances that we're still dealing with in our own world. So you may package them up and send them away, but if you haven't dealt with the underlying issue within you, it will just show up in a different person at a different time, right? So that's why this is so important. Right? You don't want it to keep showing up in your life. By the way, this tried to show up in my life in another way. It tried to show up in my nephew, and it did. And I had to deal with that. And I went, wow, 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 wow. Like less than a year later, it shows up in my nephew who was living with me. And I saw it immediately. It doesn't mean I acted on it immediately because I let him get away with it and get away with it and get away with it. But I went, why is this showing up in my world again? Because there was another layer that I hadn't cleared. The bottom layer was being walked on. right? Allowing this to happen, my boundaries being so blurred. So that was what it was for me. That took some time to get to. And I'm not saying this stuff is easy, girls and guys. It isn't. This isn't easy because you have to always look at what's going on for me, but you also have to have compassion for you in this, right? It's not for you to beat yourself up and go, oh, there I go again, letting this happen. There I go being the doormat for the world again. Don't beat yourself up over this. Use this as the fodder for clearing your ancestral lineage, for clearing your fractal. Right? Some of us are dealing with alcoholism, some people with drug addiction, some people with, abuse, like physical abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse. Some of us deal with just smaller things within our relationships, but it's always you. You are the one. You're the common denominator. So you have to look for you in this. And what does it mean for you? Right? It doesn't mean you stay in an abusive relationship. It doesn't mean that you keep allowing this to happen over and over and over again. I know it's not easy when it's your child, Suzanne. I know it's not easy. I know it because I lived it. It's not easy when it's your family, but it's always your family. It's not easy when it's your close friends, but it's always your close friends because they're part of your fractal. It's not easy, but it's worth doing. It's worth clearing out the ancestral DNA. Or the ancestral lineage, the fractal. My son was kidnapped by his dad for 10 years. So our relationship is not the same mother-son relationship that we would have had if he hadn't been kidnapped. Well, that's got to be unpacked, doesn't it? You've got to unpack that one. Why was your son kidnapped from you? Why was that relationship taken away from you? Right? What was that about? I don't know. I mean, just off the top of my head, I don't know. But I want you to look at that deeper. What were the feelings that happened there? The powerlessness, the abandonment issue, perhaps the I can't find him, and so I give up, perhaps. I mean, I don't know. I don't know because I don't know all of the details of your situation. But it's worth looking at. And it's also looking at then where else does that kidnapped sort of energy come up for you? Does it come up in your relationships with your friends, with your relationship with your job, or your relationship with your money? Where does it show up? Because it's showing up. It's showing up. It is taking in all of these things, the shadow and the good, juicy feelings, and looking at them holistically, right? Because they're all symptomatic of something else going on. Because his dad was very abusive and controlling, and that was the only control he had over me after I left him. Yeah, well, that's a big one, right? That's a big one. But I want you to remember, Suzanne, and all of you, that all of these relationships are karmic. They're karmic ties coming to meet. Remember, coming to meet. It is how, why, when people meet each other, as well as the results of that group or that family dynamic. So what is that for you? What is that for you? I mean, is there a possibility, and this is just a possibility, that that there's a balancing of karma here, that in some other lifetime or in some other way, you have left someone else or been the creator? Don't, not to beat yourself up. That's not what this is about. This is about looking with big eyes at everything, the truth about what's going on here. And yeah, so your relationship with your son isn't the same because he was kidnapped, but that doesn't mean that it has to be dysfunctional. You can recognize what's going on. You can work to heal all of that within yourself. I know from your saying this, there's got to be anger there on your part. Huge anger that was ripped away from you, right? That time was taken away from you. There's got to be anger, maybe even at yourself for allowing yourself to get involved in a relationship like that. There's anger at the husband, maybe anger, misplaced anger on the son. Who knows? There's so much there to unpack. Unpack it. Clear it out. Clear it out. But you can only do that by looking at yourself. And I know this takes courage, girls. It does. It takes courage. No small amount of courage to do this work. And we have Pallas Athena on our side right now, right? Warrior woman. It maybe takes a bit of the warrior to clean this out, to clear it up. Holy shit, Janet, that makes so much sense. I know it does, sweetie. I know it's not, I'm not saying this is an easy thing for us to do, but it's ours to do. There are many things in our own lives that are going wrong at any given time. And it's all about the diagnostic tool, right? The chaos, the relationship kerfuffle is all about a diagnostic tool to show you where you're not right with you. Not so that you can blame yourself, not so that you can become the victim of these circumstances, but so you can become responsible, right? You can respond to what is going on here and to be able to work through that interference pattern so that we can clean our relationships. That's the whole purpose. Not to beat you up, not to hurt you, not to make you wrong, just so that you can clean up. You elected to come here to this planet at this time, right? You chose this. And I know I hate it when people tell me that when I'm in the midst of angst or anxiety or issues in my life, but I chose this life. I chose to come here. So I either continue doing the work or I give up. And I just succumb to the violence. I succumb to the emotional upheaval. I succumb to the chaos, or I work to clean it up. I have a choice. I always do. You always have a choice of what you're going to do with this. You work it from the individual level. Remember, this is not from the top down. You can't look out there in the field and say, well, if I fix him, then I fix me. Nope. It starts with you as the individual and then works up, right? Up the chain. All right. So let's see. Anything else? Acknowledge is enough to clear it? Sometimes, right? Sometimes acknowledging that its existence is there is, I think acknowledgement is a big part of it. I don't know if it's the only part of it. It depends on how deep it runs, right? And what, like Shrek, we're onions, right? There's always another layer that gets exposed, right? We think we clear it and then it shows back up. It showed back up in my life, with another person. The difference was I caught on to it a whole lot quicker, right? And then I could take steps to clear it. And I think sometimes it even comes back yet again just to make sure it's cleared from your field, right? And you recognize it as, oh, wow, there's that thing again. But this time I'm aware, right? I catch it the moment it shows up and I can take steps to make sure it doesn't take hold in me again, right? Because I'm clearing this not just for me, but for my ancestral lineage. It's pretty powerful stuff. And, what's interesting to me is, that I've been on this voyage over the last year to reconnect with brothers, sisters and brothers that I didn't even know I had at one point, and with others that I knew I had that I just never met. And as I've connected with these people who we all did not grow up together, none of us, or well, groups of them grew up together. But I personally did not grow up with most of these people. With one other person I grew up with, right? The other 12 I did not grow up with. And isn't it interesting to note as I get to know each one of these people, they're struggling with some of the same stuff that I'm struggling with. I went when that happened, when I realized that my brother, who I hung out with this past weekend when I went down to Oregon, is struggling with things that I'm struggling with right now too. And we did not grow up together. So it's not like we had the same interference pattern. That we had the same parents. I mean, literally, we had the same biological father. So it tells you there's something deeper going on, that it is indeed related to the DNA, right? It is indeed something that, we're incarnating with together. And it was so striking that I mean, it took my breath away for a moment to see it in him when he and I are 15 years apart in age and did not grow up with the same family. We didn't even know each other until just recently. So it's pretty amazing. So there's something deeper going on here. All right. So we can encourage others going through the same in the future. This can be transformative. Exactly. Exactly. Very good. Very powerful, Suzanne says. Um, April says, I'll start there and go deep this spiritual, powerful weekend. Acknowledging. Oh, okay. We did that one. Yeah, exactly. There's some really good stuff here. So anything in your life right now, and that's why I had you think about that first thing this morning, was anything in your life that's creating chaos. What is your relationship to that? What is in the fractal, the interference pattern that you're clearing? Take it on. Take it on, right? You've got 2 mystic rectangles coming up to be able to work through this, to have this magical aha moment. We have the challenge of the T square pointing at Saturn that says it's our duty, our responsibility to connect with the most powerful lessons that we came here to learn. By the way, I can see that in your human design. Your human design, Saturn, tells us what it is that you're challenged by in this life. Yesterday, Cindy Mitchell, who's one of the women that we see here, often shared that her Saturn was at gate 58 and gate 2. And we talked about the fact that gate 58 is the gate of joy and bliss. So she's learning lessons around how to create that, how to hold that energy, even in the face of chaos. So she may be faced with a whole lot of people that take the joy away from her, right? So her lessons are about how do I maintain that? Also, her gate 2. Gate 2 is a very receptive gate. How do I receive from the universe? She may be faced with situations where receiving something is being withheld from her. And then ultimately she sees that she's withholding it from herself. So those lessons are there. They're in your human design. And we can kind of see what that is from your Saturn. So, anyway, I will leave you all with that this morning. And thank you all for joining me. Thank you all for being courageous enough to hear this message and then maybe take some action on cleaning this out of your own personal fractal, whatever that is. If you need help, you know where to find me. And I hope you all have a blessed day. Mwah! Much love to everyone. Take care. We'll see you tomorrow morning. Bye for now. Oh, no, I'm not leaving yet. Holy cow. I totally forgot. I drew a card. How could I possibly have forgotten this? Because it's the most beautiful card. It just gave me chills when I pulled that card with the idea, with the thought to God, source, universe, whatever, to show us what it is this brings to all of us. Blessed. Card 22. We've seen her before. She's beautiful. This is all pinks and purples, and she's holding on to something that it looks like she's got her arms and stuff or her tail, whatever this is, wrapped around spirit, right? So let's read this card because this is card 22. It also, that number is a master number, right? It's a beautiful number for completely mastering something, for building from a very powerful foundation, right? So the essential meaning says something wonderful that is unearned and unexpected, grace that is an unforeseen gift from spirit. The oracle's message is there are moments in life when out of the blue, it seems that everything has been orchestrated by divine intervention. You feel blessed in ways that are difficult to express. It's as if the Red Sea parts in front of you and events come together to banish your troubles easily and naturally. You know deep down you did not deserve any of it, and yet there you are. Here you are. This is one of those times. Let awe and gratitude for all your blessings guide you now. The relationship message. You are moving toward a deepening of intimacy in a unique and sacred partnership. You know you are meant to make this connection. This union blessed by the divine will bring, transformation and beauty to the world. This is also a sign that even more important, you're being called to deeper intimacy with yourself and spirit. With this new development, you will see evidence of grace in your life. Isn't that interesting that the sun at gate 6, the gate of intimacy, and bringing that, calling that. Prosperity message. Unexpected windfalls and good fortune come your way now. You're in a phase where any difficulties or obstacles that have stymied your success seem to disappear on their own. Be ready to receive. The windows of opportunity will open wide. Accept the blessings given to you now and don't forget to share them. So this was from The Wisdom of the Oracle by Colette Baron Reed. And I absolutely adore this deck. The card is blessed. So there we go. I'm going to leave you with that. Blessed, 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 because we are blessed. All right, everyone. Now I'm going to leave. See you all tomorrow morning. Mwah! Bye for now.